Authors Publish. Welcome. Hello, welcome. How are you today? I am very excited for today's talk with Nev March. We're going to just wait a couple of minutes to get started so everybody has a chance to show up who's here today so you don't miss out. If you're here, feel free to say hello in the chat. It's always good to see your names and where you are in the world. I'm in Toronto. Oh, wow. Hello in Oman. Hello in Oregon. And hello in the Bronx. In Iowa. Hello, Monique and Lisa and Renelle. We're just going to wait another minute. Hello in Nigeria and Wyoming and Kentucky. Hello, everybody. Hello, Melanie and Bob and Rebecca and Jill. Hello. Thank you for being here and thank you for your time. We're just going to wait just a little bit more before we get started, and then I'll introduce Nev and we'll get straight into the talk. Hello in Redmond and Maryland and Long Island, and hello, everybody. Hello in Bellingham, um, someplace I used to live. So let me just pull up my notes and we will get started. Hello, writers. This is Jacob Jans with the Writers Workshop at Authors Publish. Today, I'm pleased to introduce Nev March, who will be giving a talk on how to revise and edit your manuscript. This is part of our monthly lecture series where we host talks on the craft of writing and the business of publishing. Nev March is an award-winning author of historical mysteries. Her debut novel, Murder in Old Bombay, won the Mystery Writers of America Award for Best First Crime Fiction. Her latest book, The Silversmith's Puzzle, is launching in just a few days. Nev also teaches creative writing at Rutgers and is the president of the New York chapter of Mystery Writers of America. I'm really excited for today's talk. Having heard Nev do talks for us before, I was really pleased when she suggested giving this talk. So I'm really grateful for you being here, Nev. Thank you for your time and your expertise. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And thank you for having me here.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to learn.
Awesome.
Uh,
This is going to be a fun talk.
all right. So while you pull up the slides, everybody should know that we will be sharing the slides with the recording when you send it out. So you'll get a copy of the slides. And after the talk, we will have some time for questions from the audience.
Excellent. Let me start sharing. Okay, hopefully you can see it.
Yeah, it looks good.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Jacob. So I have just a couple of quick intro slides. I'm going to launch into this. There's a lot of content here, so don't feel like you have to write things down. You will get the slides, you will get a copy of it. I'll try to liven it up with a few anecdotes. Jacob will keep me honest on time, and then we'll try to leave a little bit of time for Q&A because I love hearing from you guys, and answering your questions. So with no further ado, let's get into this. Okay. So here I am in a sari, which I don't wear often. I had a 20-year career in business analysis in a pharmaceutical company. And I returned to my passion, which is really writing fiction, writing poems, writing essays, writing all kinds of stuff, short stories, and even script writing. I started screenwriting a couple years ago, and that's been a lot of fun to mix these things up. So I was very fortunate to win the MWA award, and that pretty much launched my writing career. And that book, Murder in Old Bombay, it's won a lot of awards, which I'm thrilled about, and it's been a finalist for a couple of awards, and here it is. So pleased with it. And yes, we lost. We lost the Audi to Stephen King in our category. The Audi is for the audiobook. Vic Adam is the rock star who performed it, all 20 voices. That's one person. And of course, that year, President Obama was the winner. because he has such a wonderful, distinctive voice and such interesting content in his biography. But I always like to say we lost because I couldn't believe we were on the same page with these guys. So here are the first three books. 2020 was Murder in Old Bombay, and each book is based upon real incidents, right? Real things that happened. Some are explained, some are not. This one, A Disgraceful Embrace, is actually a short story that came out, I want to say in March, and it has the first three chapters of the next book, which will be out next week, The Silversmith's Puzzle. So for people who just cannot wait, you could start on A Disgraceful Embrace. And how did that come to be? It was really just a short story. It was a chapter that had to cut because it took away from the main story. And I found that a use for it. I found it was quite interesting and entertaining, and we turned it into a little standalone short story. And so the fourth book really is The Silversmith's Puzzle, where our intrepid duo that starts in Bombay finally ends up back in Bombay. And no, it is not the end of the series. There is at least one more coming. Definitely still have some loose ends that we need to resolve in book five. So when you're revising, Stephen King says lock your book in a drawer for at least 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks before you try to revise and edit it. So why? And that's because you're too close. You can't see what needs to change. And I found that absolutely true. Um, the first book, Murder in Old Bombay, I had at least 25 passes through it, maybe more, because I couldn't see what was wrong. I couldn't see what needed to change. So here's my process. This is a roadmap, and we're going to go through each of these three steps. Say you have a completed draft. You have written your book. Well, most writers think they're done, but they're not. Writing is rewriting. I forget who said that. So, how do you approach this now? You have something that is complete that you could just take and self-publish, which would be a mistake. So write it, revise it, then edit it, and then publish it in whatever fashion. You want to send it to agents, you want to send it to publishers, you want to self-publish. Make sure you do those two steps because it is glaringly obvious to a reader. And we're going to talk about the pieces of it. It seems like a lot, right? But here are the things that I do. This is the little secret, quick tip to saving yourself months and months of labor. Try out your changes in the outline first. Try them out. I make a copy of my outline, I make the change, I see whether it works. I look at it closely to see what would it break, and then I change my mind. So if you decided to do that in your manuscript, you would have broken something and have all the agony of putting it back together again or going a different route. And you end up with this version control problem that is a nightmare. So try out your changes in your outline, big changes. I'm going to talk about big and little changes, okay? Then that typically takes me a week. You know, I've accumulated all these ideas, these plot holes, these problems, and I put them into the outline and say, will this work? Will that work? And I don't make all the changes. I just assess whether I will make some of those changes. So we're going to talk about recording your plot holes because it's nice to catch your problems before other people do. Then you make your revisions. You decide which of those plot holes you're going to fix and you make your revisions. That typically takes me about 3 months, sometimes a little bit more, but roughly 3 months. And I say 1 to 3 months because it is just feasible that someday I will get good enough at this to make all the changes in 1 month. I'm still waiting. Then you do the line edits, and these are easier. I want to say the English majors will have no problem with this whatsoever, but it's about format. It's about making sure you have the quotes. It's all the little pieces that give a nice finished look to the material, but it's also about improving the language. It's just you don't do a lot of change in the chapters. You don't move things around here. These are smaller. So I like to call this revisions and this editing, the two different steps of it. And then hopefully it's done. Or is it? So, what are those steps, right? First, you gather your feedback. Here's a picture of my first writing group at the Hunterdon County Library. I love each and every member here. They were so generous in their time. They workshopped my book every week. We'd meet and read one chapter of Murder in Old Bombay. And that's 70 very short chapters. 70 weeks later, my book was workshopped. I didn't take all their changes. You can't. You'll just go back and forth. But I did listen very carefully to their comments and I took a lot of notes. And if somebody had an idea that was echoed by two and three and four people, they're usually right. Yeah, I might want to defend, but that's a whole separate discussion about critiquing. When you gather your feedback, now you need to think about how you're going to put it into the manuscript. So I like this zoom in, zoom out technique. You're going to gather the feedback, you're going to record it, you're going to evaluate it because you don't make every change. And then you use it in your manuscript by diving into specific chapters. So let's talk more about that. Now, I know not all of you are writers, but maybe you are wannabe writers. So don't get daunted. There is quite a lot of detail coming and a few lists, but you step through it. Somebody once told me, "How do you eat an elephant?" They asked. And the answer is one bite at a time. It takes a while. It's still always one bite at a time. So you pull out your outline, and if you don't have it, now's a good time to create it. If you're a penster, I'll show you a quick way to create it. So you zoom out and look at the entire outline. So you don't have to look at your 300, 400 page manuscript. You're looking at just one page or two pages of outline. And you examine your outline for list number one. It's coming. They're the big questions. And if you find honestly that something needs to be changed, that you don't have something quite right, don't make the change. Go and record it in your plot holes list. So you list them or you add to your list of plot holes. You could call it whatever you want. Call it changes, call it input. I like to call it plot holes because these I feel are something I will probably end up changing. These are mistakes or these are things that um, don't let the manuscript shine. So do you decide which to fix, right? You don't fix every one of them. And at this process, you're gaining your early reader input. They have a different lens than you. People think differently, and it's valuable to know that. So you add that to your list. Remember, this is all happening way before my publisher, my editor gets it. Okay, this is 3 months before they get the book. So this is me with my team, with my colleagues and my critique group, adding items to a list. Now you zoom in to the relevant chapter because some changes will affect only one chapter, some changes will affect multiple chapters, and fix it. I'm going to talk about those specific questions. And then you repeat those steps, the ones in the box, 2 to 5, until you're satisfied that all the items on your list, list number one, the big questions, are as good as you can make them. And then you look at the second list. The second list is really editing, it's detail. You're not going to move chapters around there. But this is about language. This is about really getting that finishing touch, the final shine on your manuscript. And you're going to repeat 2 to 5, those steps, zooming in, zooming out, until you're satisfied. Okay, this pass has completed the manuscript and brought it to that level the best level that I can, the best I can make it. So when do you stop? Because one could keep doing this, to kingdom come. When do you stop? So here's Walter Mosley, author of Devil in a Blue Dress and a whole series of other novels. And I did this masterclass with him. And there's also an interview that's available on YouTube, I think. And he says, when he's asked this question, when do you stop? When are you done editing? I see what's wrong, I fix it. I see what's wrong, I fix it. When I don't know how to fix it, it's done. I just thought that was such a humble and honest quote. I love that. So we'll start with the 3 sections now: outline, revision, and editing. Why do you need an outline? Well, because you can test your ideas on the outline before you actually go ahead and change your manuscript. Once you change your manuscript, you will change multiple things. So turning something back is not so easy. You can't just go to a previous version and say, oh, I just removed it. Well, you've changed 15 other things and you want to preserve at least 14 of those. So I try to always keep a current version and not go back to previous versions. I do record them because I'll steal paragraphs, but I will always test my ideas in the outline. And at this point, it's probably a good idea to talk about one of my books. I think I wanted to talk about Peril. So here's Peril at the exposition. Whoops. Yeah, there we go. Second book in my series, actually. And here the problem that I noticed was that the middle was sagging. And the reason it was sagging is that Diana, my protagonist, can't find her husband. So she tries here, she tries there, she tries here, she tries there, and it gets a little repetitive. So I'm going to talk about dupes and repeats. But I needed something to increase the urgency of that middle section. And so because she can't go into dockyards and seamy underworld of Chicago, I had a second narrator, so I created a different structure here by inserting a second narrator that's Captain Jim, the one she's searching for. And we have his perspective interspersed in the middle of the book. And then at the end, they really ramp up. But that's a structural change that I inserted because I needed to really increase the urgency of what's happening that she doesn't know, because she's searching for him, but there are very dangerous things happening behind the scenes that she doesn't know about. And it just adds urgency to the reader, and it makes her efforts more plausible and increases the rationale for her efforts to know what's actually going on in his world. So you can do very dramatic structural changes, but you start in the outline. And then, yes, you can save yourself a lot of time by doing that. An outline is a map, right? So it doesn't have to be complicated. It's literally you could draw a map with a pencil. It lays out the list of chapters. It shows how the chapters are connected, and it identifies your key turning points. And then you look at it, you can see, you can assess high points and low points, and you can ensure that at every chapter you're making promises and you're keeping promises. What does that mean? You're making promises when you set up a plan. Will the protagonist be successful or will they fail? You're making a promise to the reader that something is going to happen, right? A reveal. You're making a promise to the reader. How will that reveal get used? How is that reveal changing things? You're making a promise to the reader that something is going to happen. Now, here's the trick. You have to answer questions within 3 to 5 chapters, not the big question, the big overarching question you answer at the end. But the intermediate ones, don't make readers wait more than 10 chapters or they will forget. They will forget what that question was. So the little questions, the little promises you're making and keeping throughout, and you can see this in your outline. It's not so easy to see it in your manuscript because you're diving through 400 pages, but in your outline, you can see it. And the outline also shows where the reader is surprised, and surprises are good. You want surprises. Some reveal, some surprise, some plan in every chapter. So here's the steps. And again, don't write these down because you will get this. If you registered, you will get a copy of this. Basically, take each chapter title, copy it, bung it into your outline. And it could be in Word, it could be in Excel. It doesn't have to be any particular format. And add columns, add columns for what's happening is the action. An internal landscape I find is useful because you want to know what is the character feeling, the main character, your point of view character, the one whose eyes the reader is looking through. What are they feeling? That's important because that needs to escalate at some point. And then there are ups and downs. So to track the ups and downs, you want pace. If every chapter is constantly escalating, it is going to be a gripping book. Most thrillers are like that, but it's also exhausting for your reader. So have a little bit of variation. Up and down is good. Um, complete the columns. So write out your action is literally your uh, title of your chapter and what happens in that chapter. There could be a couple of things happening. And in pace, you're going to rate the chapter. So read the chapter over and rate it. Is it high tension or is it low tension? And it's okay to have some low tension chapters. You want to break up the that breakneck pace, but maybe not too low. So how low is too low? I think like four. Four is a bit low, but I do have a couple of chapters that I keep in there just to let people catch their breath. And then, of course, you heard show, don't tell. Who hasn't? But here's the thing. Important action must always be shown. This is why people don't like backstory very much. They don't like recounting or dream sequences because it's not happening in the moment. So show your major important pieces and less important pieces, well, they can be told, they can be moved to backstory, they can be narrated in dialogue, or you can just summarize them in a few lines. I do have minimal backstory, which is why I recommend people start with the first book, Murder in Old Bombay, because they will get the full flavor of what happened. If you read the current book, it's still a rollicking ride, and you'll get a smidgen of backstory, but not a whole lot. If a chapter doesn't propel the story forward, cut it. Okay, now a little anecdote about this one. Murder in Old Bombay, when it started out, it was 145,000 words long, and that's way too long, even for a historical. So we cut it and cut it and cut it, and it's now 115,000 words. I cannot cut it anymore. I could not. It was cut to the bone, just to let the story shine. But why did we have to cut so much? This was Kelly Ragland's feedback when I sent it to her. She loved the story, but she said there's three or four chapters in the middle that just don't propel the story forward. Now, why is that? So I have a bunch of side quests. You have the main story going through, the storyline going through, and then you have these side quests. Well, one of those side quests kind of became a little adventure novel by itself. There were three or four chapters that were exciting, they were fun, but they didn't really propel the main story at all. It was just Captain Jim doing all these things to find a doctor who had information about his main suspect, and it went on too long. So we cut three chapters out, and it was hard, but it's easy to see in the outline that this makes the story move so much better. And so it was worthwhile to cut. I don't like that phrase, kill your darlings. They're all my darlings. They're all my darlings. How am I going to kill them all? But you want to see why something needs to be cut and do what's needed to make the book shine. Ultimately, the book is a product. It's my book, baby, sure, but it's a product, and I want that product to be as good as it can possibly be. And then you're going to move some chapters around. This is the scariest part. This is why they call it the dreaded revision. If you move a chapter, the connections change. So you have to make sure your pieces tie together. Why would you move it? Because you want to move the urgency. You want to move something that is fast-paced earlier in the sequence. In the middle of a slow-paced section, you can move something that's a little bit faster, a little bit more urgent, but do it in the outline. Move the chapter titles around and check. And sometimes you might need to do a little bit more editing than that, because you move a chapter and suddenly Captain Jim is acting on something that he hasn't been told yet. Oops, there's a problem. So uh, here's the difference. Revising is major changes. It's surgery. Editing is fixing. It's like a vaccination. It's like an antibiotic maybe. It's fixing. It's not chopping, editing, moving. Sorry, chopping, moving. It is editing. Okay, another way of looking at it. When you're revising, you're adding paragraphs and adding entire chapters, like I did in Peril. You could be cutting a lot of duplicates. So, duplicates. Oh, we had a lot of duplicates in this one. The Spanish diplomat's secret. So here they're on a ship, the couple, and I had like three episodes where Captain Jim goes, "Let's search the ship," and he goes into different parts of the ship for different reasons, but it was getting to be redundant. So spotting that was an act of revision, and I cut some major sections, collapsed them together. Moving chapters around, I've talked about a little bit. When you're editing, you may trim sentences, add sentences, boost them, boost the language. You're going to use your line edits to fix grammar, tense, hanging quotes, para breaks. That's a whole laundry list. Let's go into that. Okay. So the big picture is do this first. Don't do your line edits first, or you may end up spending a lot of time on the prose, making things beautiful that you end up cutting. You cut the whole chapter. So all that work is wasted. So it asks big questions, right? Is there a problem? Have you told the reader what the issue is, what the problem is? Have you surfaced the conflict by page three? Some people say by page one, which I think it's hard to do. By at least by page three or the end of the first chapter, you have to have a burning question. If not, you're going to add it to your list of plot holes. Again, all of this is to be first added to your list of plot holes. Then you assess which you need to do. If this is a problem, yeah, this is number one to fix. Are you telling the story in an interesting way? Now, this is a hard one, right? Do you need to move chapters around to add more surprises? This is what I had to do. But the interesting way is a question. So there are many ways to add reveals. So if you have a third person point of view story that's you're looking he, she, you can change who's telling that chapter. And I usually recommend you choose the character who gets the surprise because the reader is in their shoes and therefore it will have more effect than if you use the character who is telling that person, well, they already know it, so it's not as impactful. Uh, yeah, this is about pace. We talked about that, combining chapters, combining sections of action, and then making sure you have an internal landscape, a lens. So something exciting happens and you move on. The reader feels gypped. They want to know how that exciting thing landed on your main character. That's why we read stuff, is we want emotion. We want to feel in that person's shoes and travel their journey. And then of course the connections, and then you basically fix your plot holes as you keep going. That's revising. When you're editing, you're adding in the correct format, which I'll talk about in a section. You're switching to active voice. You'll be surprised how much we just default into the way we speak, right? So switching into active voice and pumping up the verbs, dropping repeated information, dull paragraphs. Sometimes you have to write those paragraphs to get your point across, but you don't have to keep them. You can cut the bulk of them and just keep the material that you got at the end. It's whatever it takes to get it out. You check your dialogue tags. Having too many dialogue tags, his eyes widened, she grinned. Look for repeats there. Drop a lot of repeats. We're going to talk about that too. There are verbal tics that each of us possesses that we don't know about. But when you write, you will see them. You're going to look for transitions in your paragraphs, transitions in your chapters, and add in a little bit. I find that when I'm writing fast, I tend to leave out the transitions. So this is a good time to add them in. Removing repeated words. I have a laundry list of repeated words. And luckily, Microsoft Word has a find function. You can find out that, okay, I used that word 400 times in this novel. And how many could you have? 50, 60 probably. If you have 90, and I'm not talking about common words like and the and. No, specific, unique words, you don't want them too often. It starts to feel redundant and repetitive. Definitely strengthening verbs. And what was and there was. This is just how we write, it's just how it comes out. You can always switch those sentences around and delete those terms because the sentence will get stronger. Varying the sentence structure, I found something there that's useful for me to know because otherwise I tend to use the most direct way to say it. But I'm writing a historical, it has should have an archaic flavor to it. And it's in the voice of a Victorian male, most of them. So it's going to have a little more prosy structure to it. And that adds enjoyment to the story. Okay, so there are 2 pages here of lists, and I will go through them and hopefully give you a few anecdotes along the way. So there are 9 big questions. This is your revision list. Why did I write this? Most of us don't know. Most of us don't know why we wrote this. But somewhere in your manuscript is a money page. It's a page where the character's spilling their guts or the worst thing has happened and the character is feeling something. You want to find that. You want to find that big nugget, the gold right there, and see how that can be foreshadowed, repeated somewhere in another character, have someone doing the opposite of what this character is doing. That's your theme. And it's hard to find. Sometimes it's very hard for me to find when I'm outlining and drafting. I'm looking at plot, I'm looking at excitement, I'm looking at surprises, I'm looking at actual history. What's the theme? I don't know frequently until I get to that powerful page that makes me weep while I'm writing it. And I'll tell you about one chapter that did that in this book, The Silversmith's Puzzle. Um, so why did I write it is a fundamental thing. But that is important because you're going to use it, not just to realize it, but to use it. What universal truth is at the story's core? Echoes a little bit of the first, but the more personal and specific, the better. Um, we write frequently because we have a point of view, and if we're preachy about it, nobody wants to listen. You have your opinion, I have my opinion. Fine, let's agree to disagree. But I really want to convince people about something. I'm going to write a novel that puts them in that character's shoes so they can experience that feeling and maybe change their minds. So the more universal that truth is, that make it personal, make it hurt. Let's go here. What makes this a story only I can tell? So this is how you make it your voice come alive. Somewhere along the way, as you're drafting, the character will start to speak. Just trust that this will happen. And at that point, you want to imbue it with all the knowledge you have that is relevant to that character. Make that character as fully dimensional as, multidimensional as possible. But you're going to add things that it will happen automatically. But this makes it very, very strong when you own it, when you own that. This is a story only I can tell. And what are the emotional stakes for each character? So how can I raise them? This is mostly in the plot, but if you look at the whole trajectory, you may see that some of the minor characters also have huge goals and needs and try to weave that in as subplots. It's okay to add a subplot when you're revising. That's fine. It's a subplot. It's not going to impact more than maybe half a dozen or 10 chapters out of 50. It and trust me that that is not a whole lot, but it is a subplot. It is not the main plot. Otherwise, you're writing a second book. What emotional arc will the reader experience? This is key because how should the reader feel? This is the key idea behind Poe. He says everything must be written towards a goal. And I find this hard to plan ahead of time, but when I'm revising it, this is what I'm looking at. It's probably why revisions are hard for me because I am looking at this very closely. Uh, okay, emotion in the writer translates to emotion in the reader. So, a couple of things here. Don't name the emotions. Let your reader figure them out. Show them so the reader knows what's happening. And I think this is a good point to read you a page from this one, The Silversmith's Puzzle, which perhaps shows this a little bit more than I can express. It's showing versus telling. And by the way, I have this on Kindle and it's a wonderful resource, the Emotion Thesaurus. Um, it's like $10. Buy it. There's like 5 versions now. But it shows the different physical signals, internal sensations, mental responses for common emotions. And quite a lot of them. I think they have like 40 emotions. So I'm going to stop the share for a second so that you can see me better. And I'm going to read just one page. It should take about a minute, but this will help, I hope, explain what I mean by emotion in the reader and emotion in the writer. There we go. At this point, it's page 111. So at this point, Captain Jim is searching for something and he's been in a factory and he's heard something outside the factory. I'm just going to leave it at there. Even as I charged towards the lane, I spotted something on the path. A pile of cloth? A garment? No. Large Satparni blooms lay scattered beside it. Bala Mali, the gardener, was curled on the ground, his dhoti askew, his knees drawn to his chin. Blood still seeped from a head wound. I knelt, cursing. Had he heard me in the workshop and come to see who it was? He'd blundered into someone's path. The thief, the killer, stealing away? Blast the bugger, why did he strike Bala? The Mali was so puny he could scarcely swat a butterfly. Calling myself a dozen kinds of fool, I lowered my ear to his chest. Nothing. I searched his wrist for a pulse. Looking out, unseeing through the gate, I was too late. Too bloody late. Everything changes in the presence of death. Our concerns shrink in comparison. Time is more scarce and thereby more precious. A clank sounded in the road beyond, an everyday sound. The jingle of carriages mixed with the whir of bicycles. Then Bala sniffed. It galvanized me. Relief, hope, and something more. Hurry, hurry, might have a chance. God, I needed a chance to set this right. I yanked off my vest and wrapped it around his head in an overdone turban. Gently, oh, so carefully, I eased him into my arms and hurried outside. One angry shout brought the nearest Victoria to heel. I climbed in, carrying Bala, for the old man weighed scarcely more than a child. Settled in my arms, mouth open, he slept, while I cringed over every rut in the road that jarred our jolting ride. When the Victoria stopped before police headquarters, I raced to the infirmary with Bala's scrawny legs dangling in a pendulum by my side. So just a little description from a moment of remorse that I wanted to show you in the Silversmith's Puzzle. And I'll flash the cover again just so you see what I read from the Silversmith's Puzzle coming out next week. Okay, back to the slides. We have like 3 slides or 4 slides left to go. Let me share. There. Okay. Yeah. So this is a neat resource, and I find that when I want to show an emotion, I've run out of ways. So the emotion thesaurus is useful. Let's go to the next slide. Continuing our list of 9 big questions, these are the last 4. Where does the real story begin? In previous books, I have had to cut the first 2 chapters because the action's really starting before. And all the first 2 chapters were really backstory. I could squeeze them in little conversations here and there. There's questions about what to leave out. Like I mentioned, that whole adventure in modern old Bombay, it's still there, but it's not there in such excruciating detail. 3 chapters, so 5 chapters was condensed into 2. And then what's happening in or during the story that's not on the page. This is a nice way to pull in a few reveals or surprises because our reader is following the main character, but the other characters haven't frozen in time. They're also moving around, they're doing things, and the antagonist is still very much doing things. So this is a good way to think about what's happening during the time period of one chapter, what's happening that will surprise them in a later chapter. What's missing? Now, this one takes a little courage. You have to read your story like a reader, not as its author. And that means having that critical lens on, and it needs having a little separation, right? Having maybe 4 or 6 weeks gap. And that's where you will see duplicates, redundancies, slow passages. When we're in it, it's hard to see these. Now the details, right? So we've done the big things and they were grueling, but your book's still not done because now you want the finishing touch, the final gloss, a final finish to make it as good as you can. And it's like a cake, you're building layer on layer. So another list, these are 11 things to check, and they're all about language. Um, so the first part is sounds pretty straightforward. You're adding a title page. Your contact information is at top left. Your title is in caps in the middle of the page. It's centered, and below that, the author's name. Simple, very, very simple. Now you fix the format. I still like Times New Roman 12. There are publishers who have gone away from it, but you want to double space that. Times New Roman 12, 1 inch margins. Leading line has an indent and double space. Again, very simple. If you double click on the left-hand side of your entire manuscript, just anywhere on the left-hand side, triple click, the entire manuscript is highlighted, and then you make the changes once, just once. Each chapter starts with a page break. Don't have them scrolly, scrolly, scrolly. You have to have page breaks in there. And at least 5 blank lines, 5 double-spaced black lines. This gives a little white space at the top of each chapter. It's like um, a third of the page or so. And believe it or not, that's where editors like to write things. Yeah, some of them still printed out. Use active voice. Now you're in from first sentence to last sentence. You're going to go through an entire path and use active voice. Move sentences around to better connect the paragraphs. Is the dialogue smooth as you read it? You'll find that there's pieces that go, wait, why did he say that? Why did she say that? Did something happen to prompt that? Logically, people don't randomly change topic in the middle of a conversation. Something prompts that thought. So make sure that that is smooth. And of course, you're going to use observations, internal thoughts, physical sensations, all your dialogue tags and such will show what's happening. And of course, maintain a single tense. Don't switch. It's either all past or all present tense. A lot of young adults have present tense, and I find it exciting. It's a little limiting, but it is interesting. It's a different style. Remember, this is a sprint, but it's also a marathon. Each little piece may feel like a sprint, but the whole thing is a marathon. So you're going to take breaks. Do a pass, take a break, couple of days off, go have fun with friends, and then do the next pass and the next pass. So it's really a marathon. And I mean, 9 things to revise and 11 things for edits doesn't sound like a lot, but each one of those could be a separate pass through the entire manuscript. I've learned over time to group them together so I could do this in maybe entire thing in about 9 to 10 passes. This last book I actually recorded, and I can show you about 10 passes through the entire manuscript. Here's the final list of 11 things to check regarding your language. I love metaphors, but don't mix them up. Don't have too many metaphors in the same sentence. Raymond Chandler, by the way, in a single paragraph had 3 different metaphors. That's a lot. Those images is just too much. Figurative language and such can be alternated with literal language, so alternate them a little bit. And reconsider crowded sentences because you're asking a lot of your readers. Consider the context. This one is a bear because I was educated in India, so my language tends to be a little bit more towards the British education system, towards that style. Um, so there's spelling that I think are perfectly okay that are downright wrong here. And what words do you tend to repeat? Oh, here's my list. Winced. You cannot have 90 instances of people wincing. There are other ways to say it. Sighed, too much sighing in my books. I deleted 90% of them. Muttered. In the first book, there were over 100 instances of muttered. Just said softly is good enough, or just said is good enough. So drop at least half of them. Vary the sentence lengths. I talked about this before. Vary the sentence construction. And that means not every sentence is, person, verb, and did something. It's why, it's after, it's before, it's during, it's all the different ways that we can describe, which it aren't just, subject, verb, object. We want to vary that up a little bit. Drop your mitigating words. He saw. There's no need to say he saw. Just show us what he saw. The Molly was lying on the ground. That's all. We don't need to know that Captain Jim saw the Molly lying on the ground. Heard, drop these, felt, wondered, stared, thought. Drop them completely. Just keep the action. And then, of course, finally, it's grammar and spell check. Read your chapters aloud. Grammar and spell check take all of, maybe an hour because it's going to do the work for you. And it's going to give you suggestions you may not take. That's okay because our sentences could be more complex than what, Grammarly or spell check or grammar check want. But read your sentences aloud, and this is important for rhythm. It's hard to explain what rhythm is, but when you hear it, you know it. That's all I can say. When you hear it, you know it. And I'll read a paragraph over and over and say, I don't know, what's wrong with this? It just didn't feel good. And then I delete a few things and read it again, and suddenly the rhythm is there. So it is an instinct, but you can build it. It's a muscle and can be built. And after all of that work, you get one line of praise from your readers. Oh, it was such an easy read. It took a long time to make it an easy read, but that's the goal. The story should shine, not the writing. The story should be all they can think about. So, thank you for listening. I'll open up for Q&A. And I love these animations because hopefully they are engaging and making you think a little bit. And yes, please join my monthly newsletter at nevmarsh.com. If anything in this talk was useful, go ahead and join my newsletter. It's only monthly, once a month. It's got a few pictures. It tells you where I'll appear. It has some writing links in it. It has books I recommend, TV series and movies too. And it's just a lot of fun. So I'll stop the share and let's go into Q&A.
Thank you, Nev. That was wonderful. So many interesting and really helpful ideas. I really love the idea of making promises with to your reader and then fulfilling them. Like it's a simple idea, but I've never quite thought about it that way. But of course, that is like what a good author does is they set you up, they promise you that they're going to do something that you want to find out, and then it happens later on. And then, of course, that's satisfying. I think it's a great way of thinking about how one of the ways of thinking about a structure of a book. So yeah, so many
Thank
good
you.
ideas beyond that too. So let's get to some of the questions. Thank you, everybody. We have a question from Ellen. Um, your 1 to 2 months or 2 to 3 months time frame for revisions, is that working as a full-time writer, like full-time 8-ish hours a day, or around another full-time job?
It is full time. If you're working at another job, it could be twice as long, or even longer. Again, it does depend upon the book. since mine is historical fiction, I'm doing a lot of checking sources, research throughout the process to get things right, to fix errors and mistakes. In one of my books, I think it was the silversmiths, it was the Spanish diplomat. I had the people on the ship getting a cable, but there were no
Hmm.
telegrams or cables, that got onto ships in the 1890s. That happened in the 1900s. So I had to change the
Oh,
plot. So it's full time. This is my estimate, and it's based upon my actual last two books.
hmm. Yeah. And I think every writer, they just do things at a different speed. So that's, yeah, I think we have another question from like a university student, like asking that same question, like how do you manage your time? Like, how do you personally like manage how do you know when it's time to get to work?
So I can't stop, right? The story's in my head, and especially during the drafting phase, it pushes everything else out. So luckily, I have a very supportive family that makes sure that I
Hmm.
eat and exercise and takes me for walks and do the family things. Honestly, without them, I would be lost. I would be totally lost. So during the drafting phase, I'm addicted. I am literally,
Hmm.
addicted to the scenes because they keep revealing themselves and I can't stop. During the revision phase, I procrastinate. Just being honest here, I do a ton of
Yeah.
stuff to avoid revisions. I'm very productive when I'm procrastinating. I'll do stuff for nonprofits and other writers and just teach and do a lot of other things because it is the scariest part of the process for me is the revisions. But I keep writing in that list of things that I need to fix because I don't want to lose them. If I forget, if I don't jot them down, I will lose the thread. I will lose that idea. So I'll capture all these ideas, but I won't actually act on all of them.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's getting back to it. It requires some discipline. Your question is, how do you get yourself to do this? Is if you have a contract, then you absolutely have committed and you have to
Yeah.
get back on. But here's the thing, that resistance, that fear, the reason they are called the dreaded revisions is all in the first phase. Once you get into it, the story sucks you in. Now
Yeah.
you don't have any resistance. I don't have any resistance anymore because I'm just in the rhythm of, okay, let's fix this. Got that. No, I'm not going to
Hmm.
do that because I want it. I'm deciding what to do, and it's a rhythm that you get into. How many changes will I make in a day? I might make a dozen or I might make one big one. I will tell you that 90% of the time, 99% of the time, my editor is right. There's only one thing in all these years, maybe 5, 6 years now, that I have put down my foot and said, no, I am not doing that. And that is at the end of the first book. There were 3 pages where Captain Jim is sitting on the stairs and he's late for a party and he's not going to enter the party. And he's just listening to the sound of the party because he's protected those people. And he feels like, okay, I'm going to just sit here and enjoy this. But it's such an outsider moment. And my editor said, look, that's too much, just cut it. It's a mystery. It's solved. So now move on. And I said, no, that's the heart of this book. That's that emotional core. I'm going to condense it, but I'm going to leave it in there.
Hmm.
So there are still a page and a half, 2 pages of him and his thoughts sitting on the stairs outside, still the outsider, but it's precious. Those thoughts were value to me, and I hope to readers as well. You
Yeah.
just have to judge what will matter to readers. But yeah, it's a rhythm. Making the
Mhm.
changes is a rhythm, and the resistance goes away once you're in the book again.
Um, that's definitely my experience with any work, like getting over the hump and getting into the flow of it. Like there's going to be like internal emotional resistance to, but that's just like part of the process, getting past it, and then it can be interesting and exciting, right? What do you recommend for people? And this is a question from the audience. What do you recommend for people who don't have an outline? Should they just go back and create one?
Yeah, it sounds like doing work when the book is already finished, but creating that outline, you're just taking your chapter titles, and maybe you don't have chapter titles. Some people just do
Hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4. Just read the chapter and say, okay, what's the big thing that happened here? And write that out into an outline. So if you have, 50 chapters, that's 50 sentences. And
Yeah.
it should take less than a day to do because you know what happens in those
Yeah.
chapters. Now, here's a problem. If you have written, a lot of stuff in one chapter, a 20-page chapter, that actually should be cut up into three pieces. And
Hmm.
where to cut may be hard. But when you read it and you say, oh, this is happening, and this is happening, and this is happening, oh, darn. Now, that is really probably three chapters. You don't
Yeah.
have to. You can have scene breaks and then, have multiple things happening in a chapter. It seems that if you're using a third person point of view, one chapter is one point of view. And this is a rule I learned from Hallie Efron, who did a very nice training for us in Mystery Writers of America. We have monthly crime crafts where we have these really great writers come and teach us a little bit. And something I've adopted from her is one chapter, one point of view. If you want to switch, always told you can switch one time and then you're continuing in the second person's point of view. But it really is easier on
Yeah.
the reader if a single chapter has only one point of view. So that's how
It,
you cut up a big
mhm.
chapter.
That's something I've noticed as a reader is consistency of the POV, and it can be jarring when it switches at a time that it doesn't usually, and then you're like, wait a second. But it also, I think, gives the reader something to look forward to in the next chapter. Here's another little thing that you're going to be seeing from a different perspective. You come to expect those
Yeah,
changes of perspective too, and that can be nice, right?
absolutely.
We have a question from Christina. How much time do you spend on your research for historical stuff? Like far down, deep down the rabbit hole do you go?
A lot. Yeah, I love research,
Yeah.
so I'm constantly storing up little pieces that I want to read, whether they're links, they're PDFs, they're scholarly articles, they're books by historians about a particular place and time that I want to read about. And when I read, if it's a PDF, it's easier. If it's a physical book, it's a little bit harder because I actually copy out stuff into an Excel spreadsheet that has now got multiple tabs. And the reason is that's a lot of extra work, but it's searchable. If I
Hmm.
just put tags in a book, I don't know where I saw that. And I do go back to things and I want to source it. Sometimes it turns into an article or a little short story or so I do spend a lot of time in research. Um, the research phase is before my outline. So it will actually influence the plot. I'll find juicy things in research like, oh, that's gotta go in. That's gotta go in. In this current book, I have The Miracle of the Gold Brick. You can look this up on Google because it really happened. And then there's the Bombay dog riots. The Parsis, my community rioted in British India because of
Mm.
dogs. They were
Oh
killing
wow.
dogs. And it's just, to me, it's hilarious that you have a peace-loving community that, turned violent, actually violent, to protect stray dogs that nobody cares
Yeah.
about. But them. So those little things, I just had to use them. And now,
Yeah.
how do I use them in the plot so that they are important to the plot? It's not just throwing them in there. They actually change something in the plot.
Yeah.
So this is, you can tell, I could do a whole talk on research, okay? You,
Oh,
you don't
I'm
have
sure
to
you
turn me off.
could. But it seems to me like you're looking for ways like that can really like bring the story to life. Like, and that can be exciting, right? Like
Yes, yes,
little
absolutely.
gems that will make the story shine, or big gems.
Yes.
I think we're almost out of time, but you had mentioned like you have a document that shows some of your revisions process.
Yes,
Can you pull that up?
absolutely. Yeah, now I'm caveat here. This is not supposed to scare you, okay? It's just I record all my revisions, right? I record every pass through the book. So this is the spreadsheet, and I'm gonna go in here, right here, and share. This is the spreadsheet for the Silversmith's puzzle. Okay, here are some of the chapter titles: Spill the Beans, No Good as a Lawyer, Breaking the Law. And this is the date that chapter
Oh,
got
wow.
written. You'll notice that it's discontinuous. It's not consecutive. Why? Because this chapter came out on a different time. It came out at a completely different time than this one. And some chapters were written way earlier because they were just such a fun chapter. I have changed them many times, but the idea came earlier. The first revision is for my early reader because I don't give him the first draft. I'll look through it. I'll create a little bit of smoothing, little adjustment, whatever I can see, and that's this 4J basically. Jay Langley has been a wonderful support to me. Then he gives me his thoughts and I put them in. So that's revision two, right? I'm adjusting the book based upon his input. And then there are more, additional changes that occur to me like, oh, wait, that's not good. This is sort of the revision piece, and then this is my editing piece. So I've started on language adjustments way up there. This is, I think, last year, April. So revision four, if you want to call it, or pass number four, is looking at the language. He did a second pass for me. So Jay's edits
Hmm.
number two, and I made a bunch of changes through while he was doing that. There's a read aloud section. As I read, I find a lot of duplicates. So that's
Hmm.
revision number six or pass number six. Then there was a structural change. I moved a key piece of information, a reveal. I switched it. So there's only a couple of things marked. I moved that part earlier. So not everything had to be adjusted, just that big pieces that were impacted. Revision number eight. Again, I'm going through now. It's with my editor's information, right? Getting it ready for her, cutting the internals, letting the action show. This is my editor at Macmillan, Kelly Ragland, wonderful award-winning editor. She put in some key questions in here. So these two really travel together. This is the list of what she said. This is the chapter which got impacted. So that's why it doesn't have another number there. And then I have some copy edits. This is part of the production process. The copy edit people at the production company, at the publisher, gave me a few things to do. And then the first pass is what they call, proofreader version. Again, I'm going through. So as I go through the whole thing, I'm recording what day I'm doing things, right? And that's how I know from here, the summary is my draft took 7 months. And then these, when I add them up, they're about 10 weeks. So, right, roughly in revisions there. And in editing, another set of 9 weeks. So that's kind of where I got my information to put on the slide. And I know it looks like a lot, but remember, I don't have all this in the beginning. I just have one column, and that is the
Hmm.
date that I'm doing the draft. And then when I'm doing a pass, I try to do 3 or 4 chapters a day because I'm working full time. But sometimes I don't get there. And sometimes the chapters are small and I would get six done in a day.
Yeah.
So it's approximate.
I don't think everybody needs to be quite so organized in terms of keeping track of this, but it is really cool to see it like in such a specified way. I mean, most authors don't have spreadsheets keeping track of their revisions, even if they are doing just as many in a similar process.
Yeah, I don't
But
have
that is like really cool to see like it laid out so clearly, like what the process is like.
Thank you. And this is my fourth book. So the first couple of books I didn't have this process. So I
Hmm.
couldn't tell you how long it took. It probably took far longer. But now that I'm looking at that list, the nine things, the nine big things and the 11, editing short list, my checklists really.
Yeah.
Now I know what I'm looking for to change. Earlier I did probably 20 to 30 passes because I didn't know what I
Yeah.
was looking for. I was just looking at it, trying to improve it.
And you get faster and more efficient, and you can narrow down on just what you need to do.
Yeah.
Um, we are out of time, but I want to thank you so much, Nev, for so much clarity that you've provided, and hopefully it will give a lot of clarity to everybody who is working on their stories, whether now or in the future. So thank you so much. I do encourage everybody to look for your book, Murder in Old Bombay. You can also pre-order um, the Silver um, the
Silversmith's
Silversmith's
Puzzle.
Puzzle, and yeah, the books I found them at my local bookstores, but obviously they're easily acquirable online. So thank you again, Nev. And everyone, also, I encourage you to go to Nev's website, nevmarch.com. You can sign up for her newsletter. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, just a big thank you and good luck to everyone who's writing. This is such a fabulous journey and it's hard earned. You have to work at it, but the joy, the self-discovery, the feeling of accomplishment, I haven't found anything to compare. It's just a delightful journey, and I don't promise you it's easy, but it is well worth it.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who spent their time with us today. Thank you to everybody behind the scenes at Authors Publish who makes these talks possible. And thank you to all of our supporters at Authors Publish. I'm very grateful to be able to host these talks. And if you have any questions for me or for Authors Publish or any feedback, you can always email support@authorspublish.com. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Nev.
Thank you, Jacob.